In this part of the video, we are going to look at how we compound ointments and ointment bases. Some preparations we have to make the ointment base first before we can actually make our ointment. Now, let's look at yellow ointment USP. The yellow wax would be melted first on the water bath, followed by the yellow petrolatum. We mix these two together, remove from the heat source and stir until the ointment cools or congeals. The wax made the base has a greater viscosity as opposed to if we were to use the plain petrolatum alone to make our product. The mere fact that this contains yellow wax is telling us that the yellow ointment will be used to make a preparation that has an API where it's probably black or tarry or is discolored, and so the yellow helps to guide the color of the recipe. The picture used on this slide is very intentional. This is how a product made with yellow ointment would possibly look. Now let's move across to the absorption base. Here we would melt the sterile alcohol and the white wax because those are the tougher ingredients. We would then disperse or dissolve the cholesterol in that melt, right? After which we add the ingredient with the smaller or lower melting point or melting range, which is your white petrolatum. You remove this from the heat source and stir until cool. Now, the water removable bases would include your preservatives in the formulation, sodium lauryl sulfate, a surfactant, and here propylene glycol is considered a humectant in the formulation. Your oil phase will be your sterile alcohol and white paraffin. This would be an emulsion that you're making because there's oil and water. Those two are not compatible, they are not miscible, and so the sodium lauryl sulfate would be needed to help make a nice emulsion, which is your end product here. Polyethylene glycol comes in two grades here on the slide, 3350 and 400. The 3350 is combined with the lower 400, which is the liquid form, to make a nice pliable semi-solid ointment. You can vary the formulation depending on your API, your active ingredient. If you were to add a liquid ingredient to this, they are recommending substitute 50 grams of the 3350 polyethylene glycol with sterile alcohol that will help to stiffen the formulation so that the liquid will be stable. Now, please, these are two YouTube videos that you can watch that will show you or demonstrate how to make ointments using the incorporation method. This video is designed to complement other resources listed as references in this document. So if you want to learn about levigation, which is the act of mixing the powder with a portion of the base until you have a nice smooth paste, right? And then you move on to the incorporation method where you add the remaining ointment base using geometric dilution, which is demonstrated in the second video here on screen. Now, several videos are uploaded to FarmLab website, which is used to help to put this resource together. The making of ointment may also be in via the fusion method, where you're melting the base and incorporating your active ingredient, whether in the form of a powder or a viscous liquid, a volatile oil, different things, but you have to melt the base before you can add your drug. This is a nice video here shown on the website, Making Ointments, and this was BTEC Pharmaceutical Science YouTube channel. Now, we are going to move into making ointments, looking at some formulation and some methods to see how we can look at a recipe, look at the physical chemical properties, and design a method which makes sense. Again, ointments are a semi-solid preparation applied to the skin. The first formulation I want us to look at is the official simple ointment BP. It is made up of wool fat, hard paraffin, cetosterol alcohol, yellow or white soft paraffin. Let's look at the procedure. You grate the hard paraffin, and the cetosterol alcohol is already in pellets form, and you weigh these two ingredients and you can place both in the evaporating dish, or you can place the one with the higher melting point first. It really doesn't matter, because you'd have already been using a moderate heat so that none of the ingredients are overly stressed with heat exposure. So you can put both in the crucible at the same time, or one then the other. You allow that to melt over a water bath or a hot plate. You may see double boiler being used online or on resources. It simply means a pot of water, and then you put that pot in the water, and then you have your container again where it's protected from direct heat. So the pot of water on a hot plate would be considered a double boiler, which is no different from the water bath. You weigh your wool fat using a piece of paper, because you need to be able to scrape and recover all of your ingredients. So you would not weigh the wool fat into a curved weigh boat, which is inflexible. You need to be able to scrape it because it's sticky. You add this to the evaporating basin, and lastly, by the soft paraffin. So you're adding everything in the pot or the crucible according to their melting point. You remove it, stir it gently, remove it from the heat, and stir it until cold. Now you could, once congealing and cool, while it's still pourable, you can pour it into your jar like a glass jar. But if you're using a plastic, please do not pour the ointment as you remove it from the heat. The temperature needs to drop a little bit. Now, if you're using the fusion method, here we have 20% excess of ointment ingredients is normally calculated for. So if you look at this recipe, taken from the pharmaceutical practice, we were preparing 50 grams. That's the request. But we actually made 60 grams. You have to calculate for excess because some will be lost to the container during the compounding process. Now, let's look at this preparation, sulfur ointment, where we have made the simple ointment. In this slide, we made a simple ointment. So this base will now be used to make a sulfur ointment. So here you can choose to warm the ointment tile if you wish, which is just pouring some hot water over the tile, getting it dry, and then using the incorporation method to make your preparation. So we, of course, would sieve our sulfur with 180 micrometer sieve, weigh what we need, your simple ointment, and you place both on an ointment slab or the ointment tile. And of course, you can warm the tile, as we said before, dry it properly with some alcohol and paper towel, lint-free paper towel, and you proceed to levigate. You levigate, which is the act of mixing all of the powder, because it's really a small amount of powder, with a matching portion of the ointment base until you have a nice smooth paste. Once you have worked the base and the powder vigorously, there's no sign of grit or grittiness in this paste. You do a spread test, which means you spread the mixture on the ointment tile and check, make sure there's no sign of clumps, lumps, or particles. Once you're confident that you've levigated all of your powder, you then add the remaining simple ointment using geometric dilution. And of course, all the time you're working with two spatulas, because one will be used for levigating, or for spatulating, and another one will be used to help you regroup, which means you're collecting your ointment and preventing it from spread all over the surface of the spatula that you're mixing with and over the surface of the ointment slab. Once you've done mixing, you're finished mixing, you also do the spread test at the end. So spread test is done after levigation and in the end when you've made the product. Package this now into your jar by lining the jar, packing the ointment to reduce or eliminate air pockets in your ointment. You can tap it gently to consolidate the ointment in the jar. Now, depending on the ingredients, this phase may be easy, especially if the formulation has oils in it, but sometimes it can really be a bother. Again, note that the request is for 50 grams, but in this scenario, your textbook calculated for only 55 grams because we normally make 10% excess to account for compounding loss whenever we are making products using the incorporation method for whether ointment or cream where you're incorporating basic ingredients on an ointment tile. This is very different when you move and think about a paste dosage form, which is very sticky. So for paste dosage form like Fusion, we normally make 20% excess. Now, before we go to this next slide, we're going to end the recording here such that you can really think about carefully or pause the video to absorb all that we have discussed. So we're going to finish this chapter of the recording with our sulfur ointment.